Have you ever felt like no matter what you say, what you do, you're still the one being tested? Like you're in a game you didn't agree to play, and somehow you're always losing. This video isn't about blaming anyone. It's about seeing what's always been hidden, why power slips from your hands, even when you try to hold it tight. If you've ever found yourself chasing clarity, chasing peace, chasing her, then Nietzsche's rules weren't written for history books. They were written for you. Because once you understand how these 16 quiet laws work, you stop being the pawn and start being the player. And in part 5, I'll tell you about the moment I almost broke, what pulled me into the darkness, and the truth I learned that made me untouchable. But first, let me tell you a story. A friend once told me, every time I date someone new, I feel strong at first. Then it starts. The overthinking, the late replies, the second-guessing everything I say. He wasn't broken. He was reacting to invisible rules he didn't even know he was following. And if that sounds familiar, then stay with me. Because by the end of this video, you'll see the game, and you'll never play it the same again. If you've ever felt that spiral of doubt, drop a comment. I've been there. Let's start where most men lose themselves, before they even realize it. Have you ever looked back at a moment in a relationship and wondered, how did I lose control so fast? One minute you're grounded. The next you're reacting, explaining, overthinking, like you've been pushed out of your own skin. That moment, that shift, it doesn't come from her, it comes from you abandoning your center. You see, most men aren't taught how power really works. They're taught to be nice, accommodating, agreeable, and in the process they learn to fear one thing more than anything else: disapproval, silence, emotional distance. Because deep down, they've tied their sense of value to how she feels. But Nietzsche didn't play that game. He understood that emotional dependency is a leash, and whoever holds it leads. The reason you lose control in relationships isn't because you're weak. It's because no one told you what real control looks like. It doesn't yell. It doesn't explain. It doesn't chase. Real control is silent. It's the man who doesn't need her response to feel complete. It's the man who can walk away, not to punish, but because he refuses to betray himself to be loved. Imagine this. You're in a room. She pulls away, goes cold. Most men panic. They try to fix it. But Nietzsche's man, he notices, then returns to his purpose. That's not indifference. That's power. And here's the mistake most men make. They confuse love with compliance, so they sacrifice their boundaries to avoid conflict. But the moment you bend your core values to be accepted, you've traded power for approval, and you'll lose both. You're not meant to control her. You're meant to master yourself so completely that nothing outside you can pull you off center. That's the shift. Because when you stop reacting, when you stop needing, you start leading, and she'll feel it. Not through words, but through presence. If this part spoke to something in you, type, "I'm reclaiming power," and stay with me. Because next, we'll uncover how that neediness was trained into you, long before your first heartbreak. Most men don't become needy by choice. They're trained into it, not with chains or commands, but with silence, praise, and 1,000 tiny cues. From childhood, the message is clear. Be good, be liked, be approved of, and you'll be safe. You see, boys are rarely taught to build an inner compass. Instead, they're handed a mirror, reflecting what others want to see. Parents reward the nice boy. Teachers praise the obedient. Society uplifts the agreeable. So what happens when that boy grows up? He seeks validation not because he's weak, but because he's never learned another way to feel real. Every message he's absorbed says, if she's happy, you're worthy. If she's upset, you failed. That's not love. That's performance. And it's a performance that costs everything. Nietzsche saw this long before Tinder or Instagram. He called it the death of the authentic self. When you let your value be measured by someone else's mood, you vanish. Let me tell you a story. A client once told me every time his girlfriend got distant, he would spiral. He'd text more, try harder, apologize for things he didn't even do. He thought that was love, but it was fear. Fear of not being enough, unless someone said he was. And that's the lie, that you have to be chosen to feel worthy. But Nietzsche's man, he chooses himself, not because he's arrogant, but because he's anchored. You don't win respect by being liked. You win it by being real, even if that means being misunderstood. Because here's the truth. Validation is addictive. And like any addiction, it feels good short-term, but robs you of long-term power. So what do? You stop chasing mirrors, and you start building a foundation. One rooted not in reaction, but in vision. Not in being loved, but in being whole. If this part cracked something open in you, type "conditioned" in the comments. Because in the next section, we'll go deeper into the secret battle every man faces. The battle he never admits. When she tests you, do you break? It starts small. A comment. A cold silence. A sudden question that cuts just deep enough to make you wonder. Is she trying to see if I'll react? The truth? Yes, but not out of cruelty. She's testing, not to hurt, but to feel. You see, testing isn't a game she plays with words. It's something deeper, primal. An instinct wired into attraction, to see if you bend or break. Nietzsche understood this long before we had terms like shit test or emotional manipulation. He called it nature's way of measuring steel. Because steel is only trusted after it's been in fire. She pushes to see if you'll flinch. She stirs to see if your identity can be shaken. Most men fail this test because they don't know it's happening. They react, explain, defend, collapse. But the man who holds, the man who listens without trembling, the man who doesn't turn her storm into his own, he passes. Not because he fought back, but because he didn't need to. Here's the paradox. When you pass her tests, not by winning, but by not playing the emotional tug-of-war, you shift everything. Let me give you a picture. Imagine you're a mountain. She throws wind, rain, thunder, trying to find your crack, but you stay. Not still like a robot, still like a force of nature. She senses that, and she feels safe. Not because you dominate, but because you don't crumble. That's the silent war. And Nietzsche's advice: do not lower yourself into chaos to prove your strength. Rise above and reveal it. Because if she can move your center, she can rule your mind. But if you remain unmoved, she follows it. This isn't about being cold. It's about being clear. If you've ever felt yourself pulled into that emotional swirl, type, "I've been tested," and stay with me. Next, we'll explore the most underrated weapon of power: stillness. There's a kind of power that doesn't need to speak, doesn't rise to defend, doesn't rush to clarify. It just holds. Nietzsche saw stillness not as passivity, but as dominance. In today's world, most men believe the loudest wins, argue harder, talk faster, defend better. But in truth, every extra word you say gives away a piece of your power. Why? Because reaction is control. And when she can make you react, she owns the rhythm of your mind. Think about it. She accuses. You rush to explain. She questions. You feel the need to prove. But what if you didn't? What if instead of reacting, you just observed? That's stillness. Stillness is when she raises her voice and you lower yours. Stillness is when she withdraws and you remain present, but not chasing. Stillness is when the chaos swirls around you, but never enters you. Let me give you a real-world metaphor. Think of a storm, wind, lightning, flooding emotion. Most men try to outstorm the storm, but the wise man? He becomes the mountain. Still, silent, unshakable. She might scream, she might sob, She might throw everything she has at your calm, but your power isn't in stopping her. It's in not moving from who you are. That's what Nietzsche called godlike detachment. Not apathy, but elevation. Because in a world of noise, the man who speaks less owns more. Stillness creates space, and in that space, you command attention, not by force, but by frequency. So next time you feel the pull to explain, defend, chase clarity, don't. Breathe. Let the silence speak. If this hit home, type silent power in the comments. Because next, we dive into something darker, your shadow, and how not owning it gives her power you didn't even know you surrendered. Every man has a shadow, not the kind that follows him in light, but the one he buries deep, under silence, denial, distraction. It's the shame, the wound, the memory that still stings when no one's watching. Nietzsche didn't ask men to ignore it. He dared them to stare straight into it. Because here's the brutal truth. What you hide owns you, and in relationships, she will sense it. Not because she's trying to hurt you, but because instinctively, she's testing for truth. Women test what they cannot see, and when you flinch, avoid, deflect, you confirm the weakness. Let me tell you about a man I coached. He kept getting defensive when his girlfriend brought up his past. Not because she was attacking, but because he hadn't made peace with it himself. His reaction wasn't to her words. It was to the wound. But the moment he faced it, owned the loss, spoke the truth, accepted the version of himself he once rejected, everything shifted. The same test no longer rattled him. He smiled, not arrogantly, but with calm, clarity, and power. And that's what Nietzsche meant by strength of the soul. It's not in hiding darkness. It's in owning it so completely. No one can use it against you. This is your armor. Because a man who has faced his demons becomes untouchable. She says, "You're insecure." You respond, "I've been, and I've dealt with it." She says, "You're broken." You say, "I've rebuilt." There's no trigger when the wound is healed. There's no control when the shadow is owned. That's the quiet kind of power that radiates, the kind you don't need to prove, because you become it. So ask yourself, what part of you are you still running from? What pain do you fear she'll see? Because if you don't own it, she will own you. If this part landed with you, type shadow owned. Next, we step into one of Nietzsche's most powerful ideas, why walking away isn't weakness, but the highest form of control. What if I told you, the man with the most power is the one willing to leave? Not in anger, not as a threat, but in peace. Most men fear walking away. They see it as failure, as loss, as giving up. But Nietzsche saw it differently. He called it freedom, because the man who can walk away is the man who is never trapped. Here's the hidden truth no one tells you. She respects the man who stays by choice, not the one who stays out of fear. When you cling, you teach her that your center is external, that her mood, her presence, her affection defines you. But when you're willing to walk, you show her that your world stands with or without her, and that is magnetic. Let me tell you what walking away really means. It's not ghosting. It's not disappearing to play games. It's knowing who you are so deeply that you'd never betray yourself to be accepted. A student once told me he begged for a second chance after being disrespected. She lost interest instantly. But when he walked away from the next woman who crossed his boundary, she came back with curiosity, not because he manipulated her, but because he valued himself. That's the paradox. When you don't need to be kept, you become unforgettable. And here's Nietzsche's filter. Would you rather be liked and lost, or respected and remembered? Because love without boundaries isn't love, it's codependency. And the man who fears solitude will always trade power for company. But the man who thrives in solitude, he builds kingdoms. So next time you're afraid she'll leave, ask instead, am I afraid to be with myself? Because if the answer is yes, that's where the real work begins. If this spoke to your soul, type, I walk with power, and keep watching. Because in the next part, we shift the entire game. You stop adapting to her world and invite her into yours. Here's where most men go wrong. The moment they feel something real, they forget who they are. They stop leading and start following. They adjust. They delay their dreams. They shrink their schedule to fit hers. And slowly, without realizing, they dissolve. Nietzsche called it the decay of will. Not because love is wrong, but because losing your mission is. You were never meant to orbit her life. You were meant to build one so magnetic, she orbits yours. Here's the truth. She didn't fall for the man who paused his path. She fell for the man who had one. But the moment you trade purpose for proximity, you become replaceable. Let me show you what this looks like. Imagine a man obsessed with his vision. He wakes up with fire, trains with discipline, moves through his day like he's building an empire. Then he meets her. And everything pauses. He becomes available, over-explains, waits for replies, fades from his routine. She doesn't feel closer. She feels less drawn. Because the energy that attracted her was never neediness. It was gravity. A man anchored in purpose doesn't chase. He invites. He doesn't impress. He expresses. He doesn't abandon his world. He expands it and lets her step in. That's not control. That's clarity. So how do you rebuild? Start by asking, if she vanished today, would your mission still move? If the answer is no, you've given away your fire, and nothing dims attraction faster than a man who's lost his flame. Nietzsche's Übermensch didn't follow paths. He carved them. He created values. He redefined reality. Be that man. Because when your vision is sharp, your time is rare, your life is rich, she'll either rise to meet it or fall away. And either outcome, you stay whole. If this resets something in you, type, building mine. Because next, we connect everything. We step into the final metamorphosis, from approval seeker to Übermensch. It doesn't come with a warning. It comes disguised, as the moment she challenges you, as the silence after the storm, as the choice between peace and proving. This is the final test, not to win, not to dominate, but to endure. Nietzsche knew the deepest power isn't loud. It's quiet. It doesn't explode. It outlasts. Because when life strips away approval, affection, attention, who are you? That's the question this test asks. And here's what makes it brutal. No one else will see it. There's no applause for passing, no badge, no praise, just you. And a moment where she says something that would have broken you before. A moment where she withdraws, and your ego begs you to react. A moment where you feel the heat rising, but you stay cold, still, solid, unshaken. Not because you don't feel, but because you've mastered what you feel. This is what the journey has been about. Not tactics, not tricks, but transformation. You've learned to reclaim your attention, your focus, your soul. And now you embody it. When she tests, you don't tremble. When they talk, you don't shrink. When love walks away, you stay whole. That is the man no one forgets. Not because he demands to be remembered, but because he radiates something rare, presence without pretense, power without performance. This is Nietzsche's final rule. Be the crown. Don't reach for it. Don't chase it. Become it. So ask yourself, are you still trying to be enough, or are you ready to be unshaken? If this final truth hit home, type crowned. And if you know a man who needs to hear this, share it. Not to change him, but to remind him. The power was always in him. He just needed to remember. There's a man you've been told to become polite, predictable, pleasant, and then there's the man you're meant to become. The one who doesn't beg, doesn't perform, doesn't ask to be chosen. Nietzsche called him the Übermensch, the overman. Not superior by arrogance, but by self-mastery. You see, the approval seeker waits for permission. The Übermensch creates it. The approval seeker over-explains. The Übermensch moves and lets the world adjust. The approval seeker tries to please. The Übermensch dares to polarize. Let me make this real for you. A man I worked with used to text paragraphs every time she pulled away. He'd replay conversations, ask friends, question himself. He was in a mental prison, built from his own need to be liked. But one day, something snapped. He stopped chasing maybe. He stopped feeding the silence. He stopped making her emotions his weather. And in that space, he found a kind of peace that didn't ask to be understood. She didn't come running. But he didn't need her to, because he had become someone he respected. That's the shift. You don't just stop seeking approval from women. You stop seeking it from the world. You start living so aligned, so rooted, so undeniable. That approval becomes irrelevant, because your life, your actions, your energy speak louder than anything you could say. The Übermensch doesn't win by domination. He wins by evolution. He doesn't play games. He masters himself until there's nothing left to control but his own response. So how do you become that man? You stop asking, "Am I enough?" and you start living like you already are. Every rule you've heard in this video isn't about outsmarting her. It's about outgrowing your past. If this resonated with you, type "becoming it." Because in the next section, we close the loop. We bring you face to face with the final test, the one that reveals who you are when everything's on the line.